Let's talk now about some foundations as we begin to move into some real nuts and bolts stuff as you prepare for your first big speech. Now, you may occasionally feel like I'm sort of taking you back to 8th grade here, but that's not the case. Okay, as I talk you through some of these basic things, nuts and bolts pieces of making a speech work well, my experience tells me over the years that it's oftentimes some of the very basic things that students neglect because you've been doing them for so long. You did them in junior high English class and high school English class or a public speaking class that you may have taken. So we tend to neglect them and push them by the wayside, and that hurts. Okay. As a faculty member at Penn State, when I'm preparing a lecture or when I'm getting a presentation ready to go, I do the exact things that I'm asking you to do, right? I think about my audience, I outline things, I go through and I make sure I have a clear thesis statement, okay? So all these things that are going to seem perhaps mind-numbingly simple to you are so important. They're so important for a good, clear message. Remember what I said last week about the importance of clear communication. Every one of us is able to talk and communicate, but that doesn't mean we do it well. In fact, most of us do not. Again, it's a skill you can improve, and it's a skill that you will improve and you will work on. And I'm giving you the tools to make that happen. Okay, so let's talk about, briefly, some of the speeches that you did over this past week. Again, this is some general feedback, not specific. What I am going to push you to do this semester is to get yourself away from your notes. That should be scary to some of you, because that means that you don't have word for word written down in front of you that you can read from. Okay, many of the speeches that I saw this past week, you were reading word for word. So you didn't have an outline, you didn't have sort of key words there that you went from, you just read word for word. And we call that a manuscript speech, and there is a place for that. But what we're going to be working on this semester is extemporaneous speaking. That means that you've done the research and you know enough about your topic that you can look at a bullet point list on your sheet of paper and talk from that. It is the mode of speaking that is the most flexible, the most dynamic, right? The most conducive to the scenarios in which you will find yourself as a school teacher, right? Talking in front of a school board, talking in front of parents, but also as a citizen. If you go in front of your township board of supervisors to talk about plans you have for your property or to speak out against an ordinance, you want to have the ability to speak extemporaneously. And what we're looking for here is not totally freeform, okay? It is not a lack of preparedness, so it's not impromptu, right? Like Whose Line Is It Anyway? That TV show where they throw out a topic, you talk about this now. Okay, that isn't that. It's not going by the seat of your pants. In extemporaneous style speaking, you are well prepared, right? You have a fund of knowledge that you're pulling from and you're going from there. So you want it to have, and these are words taken directly from your text, you want your public speaking to have a flavor of enhanced conversation. So that conversational tone is something you're looking for because it imparts a sense of self-confidence, right? So you're building up your credibility because it sounds like you know what you're talking about. It has a smooth, even flow. You're not betraying yourself by seeming overly anxious or nervous. And we say it's enhanced conversation because it's enhanced by your knowledge. So in a normal conversation, you aren't going to have sources and citations, and you're not going to have a lot of resources that you're pulling from. But in your enhanced conversation style of an extemporaneous mode of speaking, it's enhanced with those elements, right? That extra fund of knowledge that you're using. So that's what we're looking for, okay? Conversational, more natural. You're able to focus in that way on a give and take with the audience, okay? We'll talk here in a few minutes a little bit more about how, as a public speaker, you're a co-creator of meaning with your audience. And if you're simply reading to your audience, then you're abandoning all of that wonderful stuff that comes out of that interaction. Okay? So that's important to keep in mind. Lastly, that enhanced conversational style also pulls you away from self-consciousness. Right? As a speaker, one of our biggest downfalls is to become overly self-conscious. That means you're obsessed with my hair, with how you look. What is the audience going to think of me? Right? As a public speaker, an effective public speaker, moving away from that self-consciousness is important in dealing with stage fright, and it's important in seeming like a genuine, credible authority. All right, so enough about that enhanced conversational style. Let's talk a little bit about planning. And I'm just going to talk very quickly here about the pitfalls that your textbook mentions. So as you're going through and you're planning your speech, what are some pitfalls that you're going to run into? 1, no time for incubation. Right? So an incubation period is, so oftentimes premature infants who are born, we put them in an incubator, right? Or if you've ever been on a farm where they are incubating eggs, they have the eggs in an incubator before the chicks are hatched. So before you hatch your ideas, before you put them down on paper, and certainly before you start practicing or delivering your speech, you need to give yourself time to incubate, right? Let the ideas percolate and stew and work on you, right? And some are gonna sort of float to the top and be really good, and some are ones that aren't gonna seem so relevant. And as you're reading and researching your topic, that incubation, it's very organic and a very dynamic process that can be wonderful and I think is fun. Maybe you won't or don't, but it's a fun part of the process of this. But you need time. Okay, you need time to let ideas incubate. Another planning pitfall: allowing no margin for error. Right, so doing things at the last minute. Not giving yourself that cushion again of time. So you need to allow yourself cushion. So margin for error. You don't want to have to be perfect the one time you're giving the speech. Right, so give it more than one time. Practice it, rehearse it. Give yourself time. Writer's block and speaker's block. And again, in some ways this goes back to time. My daughter came home from school yesterday and she was sitting down and she was doing her homework. And it was a very simple task that she was asked to do, simple for her, as well as for everyone else. But she was just not able to do it because she was tired, she was hungry, she was distracted, she had block. Right? So she had thinker's block in that instance. And that happens to writers and speakers as well. So I told her to go outside and run around. Right? Go play with a ball. Go outside, ride your bicycle. Do something different. Get away. So in my own experience, and your textbook goes into this in some different detail in different ways, but my own experience as a writer and as a speaker, when I have block, I need to do something else. I need to get away, and I need to let my mind refresh. Maybe take a nap, 10 or 15 minute nap. Maybe go exercise, right? Or have a sandwich. Give yourself, it's not even a luxury. I was going to say give yourself the luxury of doing that. It's not a luxury. It's essential because each one of you will have writer's block and speaker's block at some point. So give yourself the time to be able to overcome that. Okay, so patience. All right. Topic selection is the next thing we need to talk about here. Each of your 3 big speeches this semester will be addressing a different topic, okay? And so you're going to engage in this exercise of topic selection a couple of times. Now, once you see the assignment, it doesn't make much sense to be thinking about a topic until you see the assignment sheet for your first informational speech here this semester. So I'm not going to ask you to begin thinking specifically about that. Next week, part of your tasks, week 3, will be to come up with your topic for your speech, but not in week 2. But as you're thinking about your topic, so looking forward to that, you want to think about your own strengths and weaknesses. Okay? What are things with which you're familiar? What are things that you're interested in? If you want to make sure you bore your audience, discuss a topic with which you yourself are bored. So you need to know yourself, right? It's sort of a rule for life, right? Leaders who are good leaders, they know themselves, they understand themselves. People who are good speakers and good teachers and good writers, they understand themselves. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are and how to make use of them when they're addressing the topic that they're discussing. Okay? So, you might want to take time this week. It isn't an assignment, but you might want to take time this week and make a list. What are my strengths and weaknesses? What are topics I'm interested in? So that you can start to come at that with a fresh eyes next week. Your topic, is it appropriate for the audience and the occasion? Remember the rhetorical situation from last week? That's exactly what we're talking about here. Knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, that's the speaker, right? That component of the rhetorical situation. When you're thinking about your topic, you think about the occasion and you think about your audience, right? Before you write that speech or that text, okay? Because if you don't, then you're missing a tremendous opportunity to be rhetorically effective with that particular group of people. Okay, we'll be talking more about that in a few minutes. But you're picking a topic. What are your strengths and weaknesses and interests? And is that topic appropriate? Is it effective? Does it appeal to that particular audience on that particular occasion? All right? Also, in selecting your topic, you want to clarify your purpose. This is so important. Clarifying your purpose. Why am I here? And how do I accomplish that task most effectively? So, your first speech, for example, is an informative speech, an informative presentation. That's your speech number 2, I'm sorry, is informative. So that's your general purpose is to inform, right? And as you pick a topic and you design and think about your particular audience, your purpose gets more refined and more specific. And your textbook takes you through some of that, okay? But if you aren't clear about your purpose, your speech is going to miss the mark, okay? So you need to think about what is the purpose. Other purposes that we'll talk about this semester for your speeches: persuasive speeches. Okay, how are you going to persuade an audience? Not just informing, but then convincing them of something. So pursuing intellectual assent on the part of your audience. Evoking, right? Something that's evocative. These are often ceremonial presentations, like a toast or a eulogy. Something like that is, the purpose is to evoke emotion or humor, something like that. And lastly, the fourth purpose that I like to talk about is motivational, right? Which is sort of an extension of persuasive, but you're moving from that simple intellectual assent to personal action, right? So you want your audience to not just say, "Oh, yeah, I understand that," but you want them to say, "I understand that, and I'm going to do something about it," right? That's what you want your audience to say in a motivational speech.